play, just to make sure I didn't get any sleep. And I'm off stage, and the guy standing next to me, Larry Brookmeyer, and it's not like we were really friends. We weren't enemies or anything. We just barely knew each other, except we were in this play together. We're standing backstage waiting to go on, and he turns to me, and I have no idea why he did. I must have been complaining about loading United parcel trucks. And he said, there's a job open at the local radio station. And I went, really? And to this day, by the way, I also have no idea how he even knew that, because it wasn't like he was in radio himself. And so I went, it was one of the 2 stations in town. I went there the next day, and I applied, and I took a writing test and a talking test, and was told I needed, in those days, an FCC license. So I got a train up to Chicago. This was in Decatur, Illinois, and went to a bookstore and got the book to study for the test, and the next day took the test, and that was how I got started.
Yeah. Do you still do radio? Are you still...
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. In fact, I'm in my studio right now working on the July 4th 3-hour special for CBS News Radio. So, yes, I'm still doing it.
Well, that's good. I love radio. I've been doing radio for 6 years, and I just love it. There's so many different opportunities and possibilities,
Yes. Yeah, there is. Not as many as there used to be, but over-the-air radio, but podcasting has opened up a whole new thing. So it's, there is, in fact, if you look at podcasting as radio, and there's no reason why you shouldn't, there's more opportunity than ever.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah. My next question to you is, what do you find is the most difficult part for you being in radio? What do you find is the most challenging?
Oh, boy. Most challenging these days is that there's in over-the-air radio, so little that's actually being done. So much is just syndicated, or people using just syndicated music programs. People who are doing voice tracks from other markets. That there's not a lot of actual radio, or not as much of the actual over-the-air radio being done. I think nothing's that difficult for me anymore, because I've got, this long history, and people in the industry know who I am, and I don't have many problems with that. I think for people coming up, the big problem is simply pay. The money just isn't as good as it used to be.
Yeah. Everything is changing in the industry, something is always changing in the radio industry.
Yeah, that's true. And one of the problems now is that because advertisers are so spread out over other things, social media as well as obviously television. Television is no longer restricted to a handful of local channels, but hundreds of cable channels, that the advertising market is thin, and advertising is how everybody gets paid. And so if the advertising support isn't there, the money's not there. And, of course, that shows in people trying to make a living, especially in major markets where, because of, here's a problem, Trey. In the smaller markets where the cost of getting an apartment or buying a house may be cheaper, there are very few jobs because of syndication. In the major markets, there are jobs, but they don't pay necessarily what it takes to have a nice place in San Francisco or Los Angeles or New York, unless you're in the top half of 1% of talent in the business. So that's pretty challenging. And podcasting, of course, lets everybody have a show, but it doesn't let that many people make money having a show.
Yeah. Yeah, because you have to make a living out of it, if you really want to be in the business, and sometimes it's quite difficult. But
it's very difficult. It's very difficult these days for most people. There are thousands of podcasts out there, but most of them don't if you're grown up with a family and rent or a mortgage or something, that's kind of difficult. There's tons of podcasts out there that are being done mainly as promotional things for, other media, for movie companies, for magazines, for other broadcasting companies. NPR is very, very successful at having podcasts out there that help promote NPR. They also have a big enough base, since they can use the NPR stations to promote their podcasts, to get big audiences for their podcasts, because people find out about them. And I think you asked about challenges before. One of the biggest challenges right now for people trying to start in podcasts is that in the first year or so of podcasts, you could just start one, and everybody who's interested in the podcast knew it was there. Mark Maron, of course, got off to a start like that. But now, when you're up against, the New York Times and NPR and the movie companies and the cable TV companies, and they have a lot of incredible exclusive content because of their connections to the rest of the company, it's tough.
Yeah, there's always competition involved, Well, that's the business, That's what you sign up for, once you get in the industry, competition, and yeah. But if you enjoy it and, if you're having fun, there's no use of, quitting, keep trying and keep doing what you love if you truly enjoy it, being in radio.
Exactly. And trying to find that niche that will make you stand out. Trying not to be like everybody else out there, because that's a sure way to just kind of like disappear into the thousands of broadcasts that are out there. Finding something, very often it's finding something that everybody else will tell you not to do, because the advice you get from a lot of people is to try and make what you do sound like what's out there. And they'll say, well, that will sound professional. The problem is, it's not going to differentiate you from anybody else. And there's tons of stuff that sounds like that out there. So the thing is to find something that is uniquely yourself, and then hope people that you have the right format or word gets around, but something where people will hear it and they connect because they've never heard that before.
Yeah. It's interesting, and the internet these days, it's good for the radio and podcasting stuff now, because you could get all your stuff out there with just streaming on the internet.
Yes, you can. The thing is to build up the numbers so you can make money. There was a time not very long ago where you could start to monetize, not necessarily to make money, but start to get advertisers at 50,000 listeners. Now we're up over like 100,000, because you've got a bunch of podcasts out there that are listened to by millions. So you've got to get up over that 100,000 number now to, start getting some income coming back in. And if that's your goal. Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes people do podcasts again to promote something else that they're doing, a book that they're writing or something else in their lives that is the way they make money, and the podcast promotes that and helps the way that the money actually comes in. So, but that's also the good thing about this. A lot of flexibility, and a lot of different ways to do this. It's not like you have one job like in the old days of radio, and that job either makes money for you or not. There's a lot of different ways through social media to connect these things in order to get something going.
Yeah. My next question to you is, do you have any upcoming projects in radio? I know you mentioned you're doing, the 4th of July special for...
I do the holiday specials for CBS News Radio, and I do it for Dave Ross. I've decided to stop. It's funny, I had another offer last week from a major market to do 5-day a week, and I said, no, I'm done with that. The audience in local radio, sadly, with a few exceptions, is not significant enough for me to go, yeah, I'll spend my time doing that. What I'm mainly doing in the business right now is I'm vice president and head of programming for a podcast company, District Productive.
Well, it's good to keep busy, if you enjoy it, it's just good to keep busy, it keeps you grounded,
It does. It does. It's also, I like what I'm doing now because I get to bring along some talent. I get to, work with people. I get to work with various causes that myself and my partners like. So it's a mix of things that we do for profit and things that we do because we think this is a really good thing to be connected with. So it's fun. The regular radio business of broadcasting, unfortunately, isn't that much fun anymore. But that said, it was great fun for decades, and we'll see as things change and thin out, and as some of these companies restructure and get rid of some of their debt load, whether they can get back to doing interesting things again.
Yeah, you never know. Radio is constantly changing, so who knows? Maybe in the few coming months and next year, it can skyrocket,
It's, anything's possible. iHeart just got rid of about $15 billion in debt through a bankruptcy. And Cumulus looks like they're headed for bankruptcy number 2. And Entercom is in kind of deep doo-doo with their investors and things right now. After the CBS merger didn't quite produce the results that they had promised. This is all looked at as bad things, and it's bad for those companies. But as some of these companies maybe shed some of these stations, if there's not a lot of people buying, it may enable some people to come in and buy some, at least small and medium market stations again, and have more local operators doing more local programming. The problem that radio got into with syndication and all of that is, although it worked for a while, now that we're up against national programming in the form of podcasts and streaming and so many other things that are all national, that doesn't work anymore. Radio has to get back to being local, and it's a good time for it to do that because so many, and this is unfortunate, but so many local newspapers have failed. And that opened a huge thing for not just local news, but just, local programming of interest that can capture the money of local advertisers who can't afford to advertise on, big national things, or would not do a streaming show or something because a local message would get lost out there in the international morass that is the internet. So there's the possibility of radio coming back as a local, as a true, vibrant local medium again. The problem is you've got to get some of these big companies that ate up all of these local stations and destroyed the programming to go away, to either give the stations away as a loss, as part of a bankruptcy move, or to sell very cheaply